What's up guys, Asian here with our Sunspire off-tank build video. Now this particular build video is going to be a little bit different from other builds because for each of the three different bosses here, we're going to have a slightly different setup, and that's just because of the nature of each fight. Lokkestiiz, depending on the strategy, you might be able to be within the melee stack, other times you'll be out of it. Yolnahkriin, you usually should be out of it, and then for Naviintaas, it kind of depends on the specific strategy that you're running, but you will have to make a couple of gear swaps potentially. So this particular build is what I run when I off tank. Now you might be asked to run different sets depending on the group setup. So when we go over gear, you can pretty much refer back to my tanking gear video. I'll have a link in the description below to that one for any sort of other sets you might want to hold on to, just in case a raid lead asks you if you're able to wear this set. So this is what I personally wear. This is not a hard and fast build that you should be running for every single Sunspire group that you might be running with. So let's go ahead and get started here. So first, let's go over Lokkestiiz first. I have my Lokkestiiz set up. Okay. So this is the Lokkestiiz setup. So for Lokkestiiz, I am able to be within melee range. So I am able to apply Engulfing Flames. Now, you might not need to apply Engulfing Flames depending on how many magic DPS you have and whether you have a mag decay in your group. So this last ability slot here, where Engulfing Flames is, that can be swapped out for Stone Giant if you don't have a stam decay in group. Otherwise, it's just a straight up flex spot. But in terms of gear, running Symphony of Blades for the additional regen that you will be able to give out to everybody, so you will need some form of group heal, whether that's Vigor, Energy Orbs, or Cinderstorm. Doesn't really matter which one you run. I personally like Energy Orb because it provides the combustion synergy as well, as long as you have some form of healing on your bars. The next set is going to be Torug's Pact. Again, this might not be worn on you. You might wear a different set. If you're very stamina heavy, for example, you might run Hercines instead. If you're very magic heavy, you might be running Worm instead. So play around and just pay attention to what your raid lead asks for. For this particular build, though, I am running Torug's Pact for the groups that I run with when I off-tank. The second set, and this is pretty much always going to be in the off tank, it's going to be Ebon Armory. So this provides that additional max health for everybody, so really great for overall survivability. Again, you might not need to run this depending on the specific group. Maybe the main tank is going to be wearing it, but for Lokkestiiz, because most groups will have the main tank off using defensive posture, you will typically be wearing Ebon because you'll always be within range of the group to apply the buff. The main tank might not be able to apply the buff the whole time. So Ebon is definitely an off-tank set for Sunspire. And then we have the sword and board, obviously, and then I'm using a bow. That's because I also use bow on Yolnahkriin, so to kind of minimize all the swapping I have to do, I just stick with the bow in the back bar, but you can go with a lightning staff or a frost staff. It really depends on magic DPS and all that stuff. Usually, I would be running a lightning staff, but we do have two healers that are running lightning blockade, so I don't necessarily need to run it, so I'm just running bow just for some additional DPS, and again, it's just easier for me to not have to swap between a frost staff and a bow when we go from Lokkestiiz to Yolnahkriin. Again, link in the description below to the gear video for tanks. You will want to have all those sets on hand because each group is going to be a little bit different, asking what second set you want to run. For enchants, Infused Crusher on the back bar for that additional resistance debuff, and then front bar I have Crusher again, but you can just put any other enchant there. I have Infused, but you can go with any other sort of trait, Decisive, Charge, Defending, whatever you really want here. I just have Infused here, just because it's more beneficial than anything else if I do happen to have Endless Hail drop off for whatever reason. At least I'm getting a little bit of additional Crusher uptime, and it's a little bit stronger than if I didn't have that infused enchant there. Traits and enchants, pretty much exactly what you would expect. I have 2 block cost reduction, so 2 bracing enchants, and I have 1 magic regen enchant. And then for traits, I have sturdy on all my small pieces. I have sturdy on my large. I would normally have infused here, but I'm going with sturdy here. Then do I have infused on my chest and legs with prismatic enchants on my large pieces, and I have health enchants on my small pieces here. I'm a Dark Elf on my tank, but this is pretty much exactly what you would expect to see from a tank. It's any race, doesn't really matter. The best race is obviously going to be variable depending on who you ask. Most people will say Nord, other people might say Imperial. Still others might say Argonians. I'm personally a fan of Nords as the best tanking race, but race doesn't really matter too much for tanks. Same thing with attributes, it's going to vary depending on your race. So I'm a Dark Elf, I don't have any sort of max health racial passives, so I have to put more points into health here. The boon I'm using is the Apprentice because I'm running Engulfing Flames, so I want as much of a buff as I possibly can. You can change out your Mundus depending on what you want. You want more magic regen? Go with the Atronach. You want some more movement speed? Run the Steed. So this is specific for my build because I tend to run Engulfing Flames on my groups where I am a Dragon Knight off tank. And then I have Witch Sugar Skulls for the Tri-Stat bonus and the health regen. Now for skills, we have Pierce Armor. You can go with Ransack if you want the minor protection. Not all classes need the Ransack. I'm just running Pierce Armor because of the major reach that you also get. We have Heroic Slash for the minor heroism and minor maim. Igneous Shields for the major mending and shield and more stamina from the passives. And Dragon Blood, self-heal, pretty self-explanatory. And then Engulfing Flames, again, you can also run Stone Giant if you have a Mag Decay in group that's already providing Engulfing Flames, or you're in an all stamina group. If you have a Stamina Decay and a Magic Decay, then you don't necessarily need to run either ability, and then you can just swap this out for whatever ability you prefer. Then we have Barrier here. I like to keep Barrier on here just in case the healer doesn't have Barrier up for the beam phase when it comes out. It's always nice to have that sort of additional backup there just in case. Back bar, pretty self-explanatory. Inner Rage, Balance, Energy Orbs is to help proc Symphony. Endless Hail, if you're running Lightning Staff or Ice Staff, run Elemental Blockade instead. And then Unrelenting Grip to help pull in those Flame Atronachs. So you do have Flame Atros to deal with in Lokkestiiz hard mode in particular. They will not spawn on non-hard mode, but it's still good to have Unrelenting Grip there anyways, in case you are doing hard mode. If you're not doing hard mode, you can swap this out for any other ability that you would like, but I'm assuming that you are trying to, at the very least, progress through hard mode, so make sure to have Unrelenting Grip to pull in those Flame Atros when they spawn. And finally, obviously, Aggressive Warhorn. For CPs, pretty standard for tanks, so 49 Arcanist, 56 Tenacity, 66 Shadow War, 52 Tumbling, 47 Warlord. Again, kind of play around with that however you'd like. Blue CPs, I have my CP set up for Mag Decay. You can set them up however you really like. More DPS is always good, but it doesn't really matter too much. You're actually not taking that much damage in any of the dragon fights, so it's not necessary to put a lot of points into Blessed. If you want to, you can, but it's not absolutely necessary. What's more important is obviously your green and red CPs. Blue CPs don't really matter too much for support roles, outside of healers maybe. Then you have 81 Ironclad, 21 Spell Shield, 40 Thick Skin, 64 Hardy, 64 Elemental Defender. You will be taking a little bit of physical damage throughout the entire trial, so you might want to hold on to 64 points into Hardy. You can drop this if you need to. You'll, typically speaking, will probably end up taking more elemental than physical damage, so you can drop this if you would like. But the physical damage that you do have to deal with, the two-handers, the shorn boards, they can hurt quite a bit. The Iron Atro too, if you're off tank for Lokkestiiz or Yolnahkriin. So I recommend sticking with 64, 64, 40, 81, 21, like I have here. So that's Lokkestiiz. Now going on to Yolnahkriin. Again, not much in terms of gear change. Gear remains pretty much exactly the same. In terms of skills, here, depending on how far out you are, taking the Iron Atro, Blockade probably won't be able to hit the dragon. So if you want to maintain good Crusher uptime, you're the one responsible for Torugs, you'll want to run Endless Hail. If you're not running Torugs, if you're not the one responsible for the Crusher uptimes, you don't need to run a bow back bar. You can run your Ice Staff, Lightning Staff, whatever you're comfortable with on the back bar. But because we're in Torugs and we're responsible for the Crusher, Blockade won't reach from where we are, so we have to use Endless Hail in order to get the Crusher proc on the dragon. So a little bit of something to keep in mind here for this build specifically, because I'm the one responsible for Crusher, I'm running Endless Hail and a bow back bar for Yolnahkriin. Other than that though, bars stay pretty much exactly the same. Engulfing Flames, not really useful here. Instead of Engulfing Flames, I would recommend running Stone Giant instead, for the additional damage, the damage debuff from the stagger. If you have a stamina decay, my group, for example, does have a stamina decay, so you don't need to run Stone Giant. But if you don't have one, you should practice running Stone Giant here. You need to use it once every 6 seconds. So just keep in mind it does use stamina, so keep an eye on your stamina bar. You might need to heavy attack a little bit here and there, just to make sure you have enough stamina. And I do recommend holding on to an Unrelenting Grip in case you get 2 spawns of the Flame Atros. So the first spawn in hard mode should be pulled underneath the dragon. If you're not doing hard mode, typically speaking, you'll just pull them straight back and just deal with them in the back. But on hard mode, if you happen to get the second spawn, so you have the 2 that just were pulled underneath the dragon and killed, if you take too long, you'll have 2 more that spawn. A lot of groups at that point will normally just pull those 2 towards the back and then either kill them or ignore them, push Yolnahkriin to the flying phase, and then kill them while he's flying. So it's important to have that Unrelenting Grip there just in case your group has a little bit lower DPS and you do have that second spawn of Flame Atros. Finally, for Naviintaas, this is also a little bit different. So I do have the Ice Staff here. And I am within melee range, so off tank for Naviintaas usually has to deal with the adds, the 2 adds that spawn on hard mode. If you're not doing hard mode, then you might be swapping taunt with the tank, depending on whether you're doing with that strategy. And you're also responsible, at least in part, for kind of group together the adds during the flying phase as well. So there's a lot of different roles you could be playing as the off tank. For this particular off-tanking role, we are assuming that we are taking the adds that spawn on hard mode when portals go out. We are assuming that we are not swapping with the tank when the tank gets hit with marked for death. We're also assuming that for hard mode, we are not taking the statues either. We're running the 3-tank strategy. So for this build, we're still running Ebon, and we are now running, instead of Torugs, we're running Alkosh, because now we're within melee range, we can run Alkosh. But again, this can be swapped out depending on what specifically your group asks for. So my group likes Alkosh on the off tank because I'm right there in front of it, and I happen to be able to hit the adds that spawn as well as the adds during the flying phases of Alkosh a little bit more consistently than a stamina DPS would be able to in our group. But this is not always going to be the case, so make sure to pay attention to what you really asked for. You might be running Hircine, you might be running Worm, you might be running Torug, so just keep that in mind and adjust accordingly. Now we're still running Symphony, we're still running Ebon Armory here. Skills bars pretty much remain exactly the same here, just obviously we have Unstable Wall instead of Bow, so we don't have Endless Hail here. Still want to have Unrelenting Grip because you still get Flame Atros, so you still want to pull those in. Even on non-hard mode, you're going to get the Flame Atros, so just make sure to pull those into the groups, that way they get cleaved down. And other than that, everything pretty much stays the same. Engulfing Flames depends on whether you have Magic DPS and a Mag Decay. Otherwise, run Stone Giant unless you have a Stam Decay, in which case you don't need to run Stone Giant, and then you can just replace that with anything else. So hopefully this sort of build video sort of makes sense overall. Again, off-tanking for Naviintaas can have a lot of different ways. So some groups do a slow strat where you kill the statue first, then do portals, and then do add phases. So in that instance, you might need a little bit different build, but you know, it all depends on the specific group. I'm just sharing what I am running for specifically the Mayflower progression whenever I off-tank for Mayflower. So again, your group might be different. So just play around with sets as an on-needed basis and play around with skills as a needed basis. This just kind of gives you an idea of what you should be shooting for if you want to do Sunspire as an off-tank. That concludes this build video. I know it was relatively short, but gear pretty much remained exactly the same across the board. Skills pretty much remain exactly the same across the board. I just kind of wanted to talk about a couple of variations that you could do from boss to boss to boss. But that concludes this build. Hopefully you guys found this informative. Let me know down in the comment section below if you guys have any questions about the build or off-tanking any of the dragons in Sunspire. I have done both main tank and off-tank, so I do have experience in answering both roles. So just let me know in the comment section below whether you have any questions. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.